Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic episode of Keeping It Geekly. It's your Cape Crusader Cody, and we're hanging out with our brand new friend, DJ Wiedrich. We're here to break down Glitch, issue 1, and everything in between. And man, I love this book. It's unfortunate. I always tell people I wish I could save the backstage stuff. Maybe one day I'll do that. But, man, I cannot talk about how much I love this book. We just randomly connected just a few days ago, and it was awesome. I seen it, kind of picking up the vibe like Chappie. I felt like what Bionicle Man.
Bicentennial Man.
Bicentennial Man. Yeah. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Dude, it's such an old title, and I was reading it, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, dude, there's a Robin Williams movie that this reminds me of, and it was like, it was like a darker version of that.
That's exactly what I've been telling a lot of people is that, it wasn't necessarily an intentional thing with this book, but as I was working on it and writing the script and doing the artwork for it, is like, there are definitely, themes similar to what we see in the Bicentennial Man. Obviously it goes in a different direction and thing, but I was just like, yeah, this is definitely giving me that vibe. That stuff like that, Ex Machina, you mentioned Chappie is kind of a cool one to compare it to a little bit. But again, very, very glad to hear that you like the book, and also fantastic work on pronouncing my name. I know I just told you how to pronounce it, but great work nonetheless.
So my favorite thing is like when people, I always ask. I grew up with a speech impediment, and it can be rough. It can be rough out here for podcasters. Some of you guys have really, really hard names. And I think people become creators just for that. They're like, we're going to find a podcaster. We're going to make their life miserable with this. But you're like, hey, it's like these two words combined. I'm like, you know what? It's these two words combined. I'm just going to, I have my notes typed up. I literally typed word for word what you said the words were. I'm like, I looked over. I'm like, we're not messing this one up tonight, boys.
A man who's prepared. I like it.
So DJ, I've seen your portfolio. Awesome work. God, there was that Daredevil, holding what is it? The weights of justice, the scales of justice.
Yep.
And dude, such an awesome piece of work. Holy crap. But you done cover work for IDW's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, that has to be like a childhood dream.
Oh, it absolutely was. I mean, it was a store exclusive, so I think there was only close to 1,200 printed, so very, very limited. But the fact that I was able to do my very first ever published work on a Ninja Turtle cover, right? I mean, there's a saying at every convention that I've ever gone to. It doesn't matter if it's an anime con or a comic con or a collector con or whatever. Everyone loves turtles. Everyone loves turtles. And so to have something that is so widely beloved in the nerd community, being one of the first, if not the first thing I ever worked on in a professional way, is just awesome. And I have some that I have my workspace that I'll just look at sometimes. It's like, man, I did that. That's pretty sick,
So where did it all begin? What kind of just pushed you to want to become a comic book creator?
I've always loved drawing. I was always the kid in the back of class, just doodling in his notebook, I was a good student, but I should have taken more notes. But that was always something that I loved. But growing up, everyone tells you there's no money in the arts, so you might want to try to become a doctor and make some money, which obviously did not happen. But again, it was always something that I loved. And when I got into college and had opportunity to take some really good in-depth drawing courses, it was sort of just like an epiphany moment of, this is what I need to do. This is what I'm passionate about. This is what I love to do. And this is, if I keep putting work into this, I will see results. Because Bob Ross is very popular for, I guess it's not the exact quote, but essentially saying that talent is about passion, right? If you're passionate about something, you're going to take the time to learn how to do it right. You're going to take the time to learn how to make it as high quality as you can. And that's where the talent lies, right? And so that's been my pursuit as far as art is concerned over the past 6 or 7 years since I graduated college. I think 6 or 7 years. Is to just pursue that passion and build that talent as much as I possibly can. And of course, I always loved comic characters, growing up in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy era.
Yeah, the best, right?
Yeah, and then the X-Men movies, and of course, leading into, the MCU, DCU, all that stuff. It was always something that I was interested in. And so just kind of those things coming together. And when I, finally started seriously collecting comics and just studying them like they're a textbook, just looking at, okay, how do they accomplish this effect? What kind of rendering are they doing? What type of anatomical structure, how are they doing this with the body and like twisting in this way and making it convincing, stuff like that. And again, just realizing that that's what I was passionate about and that's what I needed to pursue.
So, I mean, did you take any sort of like art classes or like any additional study? And you used some pretty decent terminology there. So I feel like maybe you had something you were working on in the past.
Well, I had some basic art courses. I mean, I have an art degree, a bachelor's degree in art, and with what's it called, specification, or what's the term? Anyway, specification in digital illustration. I was trained specifically.
Like a little something,
Yeah, exactly. But very, very basic, 2D, 3D design, drawing 1, 2, and 3, that type of thing. Learning, how to use perspective and a lot of simple tools that a lot of artists will have been exposed to at some point in their life. But a lot of my development actually came after graduating college, when, I started, really diving deep into tutorials that, for instance, David Finch posts all the time. Those are incredible. Studying different drawing books, anatomy instruction books. There's a whole series of books that I have from an artist named Bern Hogarth, who goes through how to draw anatomy, heads, fabric, hands, like all these different things, books about composition, and always just trying to find a way to improve as an artist. So I hesitate to say the term self-taught, because I'm not teaching myself these things. I'm studying what other people have, presented. But if it's not in a class, I guess the only term you can really use is self-taught.
Yeah, I would say, going out and getting it like that. It's about, I would say, at the roots of what it means to self-teach. And I think it's awesome that you went so deep into your passion like that. Where did you kind of learn how to do the script writing? Because that's a whole nother beast in itself, in combination with the creative process of writing comics. So where'd you start learning that?
So what's funny is I don't consider myself a writer at all. That's more my two brothers' forte. I have a younger brother and an older brother. Both, one's an English teacher, one's taking English in college, and they both, like my younger brother, he reads poetry all the time, like unironically, just reads books and books and books about poetry and stuff. So for me, the reason I wrote this book rather than just trying to find a writer for it is because it sort of just came to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I've been telling a lot of people that the story kind of flooded into my head a couple years ago when I was working in a manufacturing plant. I was on an assembly line, and so those jobs you can just kind of shut your brain off, muscle memory, put things together. And within one work shift, I had this story just kind of like almost like play like a movie in my head, and that never happens to me. And so I was like, okay, I clearly got to do something with this, because this is not an everyday occurrence. But as far as like script writing, I reached out to a lot of different people who had experience with that. I have a guy who I consider to be a bit of a mentor named Matt Slay, who did some work on Ninja Turtle comics in the early 2000s. Ninja Turtles, being a part of my career again. But he was very helpful and helped me figure out how to pace things. And then, of course, my two brothers, I reached out to them and talked to them. And I also just looked into how script writing worked in the comic world. I looked at sample scripts of what, comic writers like Scott Snyder, Frank Miller, what those guys did, and, try to do, not necessarily mimic what they did, because they have their own style and everything, but just try to take the format and apply it to basically what was a novel that I'd written of the script, and break it down to where it was easier to figure out, okay, this is where this goes, this is how this page is going to look. So that's definitely been more of a learning curve over the past 2 or 3-ish years since I've been developing this book. But I'm definitely more comfortable with it now, to where I'm, I've got the script for issues 2 and 3 of Glitch all mapped out and written and ready to go. I was telling you before the show that I'm working on artwork for issue 2 right now. So again, learning curve, very much not as ahead of things like knowledge-wise as my art and drawing is concerned, but still to the point where I'm comfortable, where I have a story and I know how to put it together in at least a decent way, right?
So was this your first time doing interiors as an artist as well?
It was not. I actually did interiors for a book whose Kickstarter finished yesterday, actually. It was a superhero book called Athena, Goddess of Thunder. Very much a sort of a love letter to Wonder Woman type of thing, which is a really cool book. I actually got to do the pencils, inks, and colors for the interiors for
That's
that,
awesome.
which is really exciting. The writer and I are, finishing things up. But so not my first time, but what's cool is that while working on Glitch issue 1, I saw some things that I did with the first issue of that book, Athena, and I'm
Yeah.
very proud of that Athena book. But of course, from everything you do, you should learn from it and
Yeah.
make it better the next time, right? Naturally. And so I was able to do that with Glitch, and subsequently I'm seeing even more improvements with, the formatting and
Mhm.
composition of pages for issue 2, and it'll, continue on in that pattern, hopefully, as I continue to learn and improve.
So, I mean, I really find it remarkable, just your experience with like the script writing and what I read, because I really thought you did an outstanding job with like your beats, with leading and laying breadcrumbs, and it was a pleasant surprise with some of the things that I read. I don't want to get too much into spoiler territory, but your ability to write and just knowing that's your first time doing it. I mean, I thought it was awesome. And I think the title is really good. Are we allowed to talk about that? Would that be too much spoiler?
I'll talk about title. Absolutely not. Go ahead. Yeah.
So I love how it's like a slur. I love how it's like a slur for the Thai units.
I've never heard that comment from that before.
Well, because when you read it, you're like, okay, well, what's this going to be about? And I love how it's like based off of people just being jerks, right? Or not, maybe not being the kindness.
Right. Yeah, I like that. And it's funny because the name Glitch, it has, at least in my life, it has an origin of like 17 years in the making, because my little brother and I actually made this character back when I was 12 and he was like 5.
Oh, that's awesome.
And of course, back when we made it, it was like sort of a villain of the week type of thing. Oh, this android, like, it's mad at humanity, steals, money from banks and weapons from military expos in order to wage war on humanity. Very much like cheesy, like superhero like stuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what stayed for a while. And then when the story, kind of just materialized, I was like, okay, well, there's this character that fits this pretty well. Let's turn into more of a psychological thing. And I always liked the name Glitch. It just worked. I liked how simple it is. And, turning it into a slur for him, as you mentioned, just kind of made sense. Like, what's one of the meaner things you can say to an android? And of course, telling him that he's malfunctioned or that he's a glitch, right, is probably the meanest thing you can say, because you can imagine probably if you put yourself in the android's position, they're probably very proud of their functionality. They're very proud of their programming. That's who they are. That'd be like, for us, maybe insulting our faith or our beliefs or something like that, insulting who we are as a person. And so it just kind of made sense. I was developing the story like, okay, yeah, this is what's going to be sort of a tipping point for him of sorts.
And I just love like how you created this character and the beats that went into the character itself. You did a really good job of laying the foundation of why this character is different and significant. And you really left a really interesting piece too. Maybe we'll talk backstage about it. I don't want to spoil too much, but
sure.
Something to look forward to in upcoming issues. But I just love how the characters intertwine in the beginning too. It's I don't know. There's a movie, I think it's called like Crash or something, where it's like all different perspectives of like a crash, and like you see all these different like people like webbed together to create the story in the beginning. And I thought that was a really awesome way to start it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about creating a world, right? Creating a world that these characters actually live in, and maybe not directly interact, but their existence and their actions affect one another in at least some minor way, right? And I think that was a major emphasis for me as far as one of the themes in the first issue was kind of hammering that home, is that, we all live in a world where each and everything we do impacts others, at least in a very minor way, right? Like, for instance, if you go to a gas station, right, and you are leaving and you hold the door open for somebody, that small little action is going to probably boost their day. Or if you do the opposite, where you slam a door in somebody's face, that's going to make them pretty grumpy for the rest of the day, right? A small, seemingly small action has some consequences that carry on into another person's life, then if they're upset for the rest of the day, maybe it impacts, their family's life or something like that. These things have sort of a domino effect, and making sure that that point was emphasized in this issue was, at least for me, pretty important.
So I think it's a really good pitch, the concept. We follow an android who's struggling to understand what it means to be human. So as the creator of Glitch, for you, what's it mean to be human? Like, what's humanity, if you could define it?
For me, humanity is, or at least understanding humanity is understanding its flaws, but also understanding that with those flaws come strengths, right? And understanding that not anyone is all evil, not anyone's all good. There's strengths and weaknesses that everybody has. Some people have more weaknesses, some people have more strengths, but everyone is at least somewhere in that gray area. And I think, as we explore throughout the book, I think that's something that the android kind of has a hard time understanding. And I think often as we as humans have a hard time understanding, we tend to throw people in camps all over the place. Yeah. And they're like, well, this person's a terrible person. But then we neglect the fact that maybe that person, visits their, widowed grandma every other week, right? And is trying to help them out. But maybe they're just a jerk to other people, right? There's nuance to humanity. There's nuance to who we are as individuals. And again, that's just one of the many things that this android, Ty, has a hard time understanding.
And I love how intricate things get. It really. Have you ever played Detroit Become Human?
I have not played it, but I've watched through playthroughs multiple times. Basically, like watching a movie. My wife and I will do that sometimes. We'll find a game, watch through the game.
Oh yeah.
And Detroit Become Human was one of those. So yeah.
I used to do Twitch streaming. We actually have my mod over on Twitch, Tipsy Pickle, joining us. Nice. Welcome to the stream. Welcome to Stream Pickle. Detroit Become Human was one of my favorite games to stream. I love the choices, the moral dilemmas, and everything. And I loved when I was reading this. I loved how intricate this android was, and how circumstances of its environment, it had to adapt to, make repairs on the go. And you see how it's opening up its arm and it's repairing its arm. And I just love how intricate this thing got, and just watching it throughout the seasons. You did a really phenomenal job too of changing the seasons, I thought.
Thank you.
I mean, what does this robot end up going through, without spoiling too much, through this book? I guess what's humanity look like to this android through its lens and perspective?
I think for him, again, without going too far into it, again, he has a hard time understanding sort of what his role is, right? I think he kind of puts more importance on himself than he should. And I think he just kind of, you kind of see a little bit, he just kind of becomes a little bitter, and over some things that maybe aren't justified, right? Because I think when we look at a lot of androids turning against humanity storylines, right, we tend to see usually one of two scenarios. Either the androids are inherently evil and they just, decide to destroy humanity for their own selfish purposes, or the humans are super jerks to the point where, the androids retaliate, right? That's usually one or two things that, obviously there's different ones, but those are usually the main two ones. And so for me, what was really important is that, again, emphasizing that while in this series, this android will, undergo, I guess, persecution is too strong of a word for what he goes through, but discomfort about who he is because of humans. But you could honestly say that a lot of what happens in this series is a bit of an overreaction, but you got to remember that this android's sort of like a toddler who's given a ton of information all at once and is having a hard time piecing it together in a mature way.
I think the way you went about it too was really well done and crafted. It's not just a typical android turns evil against humanity, and that's what I think I love the most about it. The way you tie this android into its respective role and how it grows into that role felt awesome. And I think what we'll do right now is pull it up on Kickstarter. Absolutely. Check out what all the hype is about. Everyone that is in chat right now, here is a link for you to look at with us. If you're able to back, we would love to see that. But simply putting this on Facebook, Twitter, anywhere you can, word of mouth is 100% free, and it cost you nothing to do. So let's go ahead and pull it up on the screen. And right away, I really loved, I remember seeing, I think it was your profile picture. And just, I was like, dude, this is such a badass logo. Like, where did the design for the Android come from?
So for the Android, it's funny. I had a design concept in mind for him for a while where he was a lot more robotic, and he had less human features for a long time. Because there was a bit of time where I wanted him to come off as more of cold, unapproachable, just have eyes and a faceplate and like speakers for a mouth rather than actually having a nose and a mouth and things like that. But over time, I just felt that was too foreign. I felt it was too, I guess, in a word, finicky. But as far as a specific cover is concerned, there's obviously some symbolism to it, and you've read the issue, so you can probably see kind of where that's coming from, where he, part of him is secure in who he is, but a part of him is kind of disjointed. He's trying to figure out, how do I fit in this world? How do I fit together? And I guess if you want to put it more literally, and also you can kind of say that it sort of resembles or symbolizes his mind as the series goes along, where it starts to kind of unwind a little bit as he continues to misunderstand, who he is, what his role is, and, who his masters are in a sense.
And we were talking about this backstage, but I love, like, the inner thighs and like the joints and stuff, like just how detailed. You didn't stray away from making this thing detailed, which I really loved, because it's such an easy thing with Androids, I feel, to give them that sleek, slender body, not put a whole lot of detail, and you could just color them gray and make them a robot. But you like went above and beyond with a lot of this design. Was there like much inspiration from other characters when creating him, or?
I wouldn't say from other characters, but for me, what I really wanted to do after I had like secured how I wanted him to look, I wanted to make it to where, he looked at least anatomically correct, right? He had the different muscle groups that a human does for functionality, right? And also, this is going to be kind of telling on myself a little bit, but making it a little bit more human anatomy accurate makes him easier to draw as a comic artist, because comic artists, for the most part, we study anatomy all the time, exaggerated muscles and abs, biceps, shoulders, chest, and everything. We study that constantly to, make it as convincing as possible. And so kind of forming those muscle groups out of metal plating was, both, a design idea, but also just to make things a little simpler as far as drawing things was concerned. Because that was another thing with the initial design, is that it just became finicky to draw, and I had to constantly look back at my design sheet and I was like, okay, like, how is this supposed to look? Okay, well, that doesn't really, flow. But then, drawing him, like, I know the muscle groups. I've studied them. I study them every day. I do a sketchbook session every morning where I'm drawing different parts of the body to make sure that I'm, continuing to understand how it moves with the body and things like that. And so I don't want to say that it was a decision partially inspired by laziness, but I'm going to say that it was.
Hey, when things work out, they work out, right? You don't question it.
Yeah, work smarter, not harder, right?
Any special symbolism with the 3754?
Actually, yes. My uncle, one of my uncles, he was number 37 in high school football. And my grandpa, who actually is featured briefly in the book and actually passed away this past year, he was number 54 when he played football in college.
I love that.
And so anytime numbers are involved, I tend to think of like, what's a football player who I can think of that can make memorizing these numbers easier? Like growing up, I had a street address of 24615. The main reason I remember that, even though I haven't lived there since I was, 14, is because it was Champ Bailey, number 24, 6, Jay Cutler, and number 15, Brandon Marshall, Denver Broncos players, right? And so it's kind of a similar approach to that.
So I really love these interiors, and seeing them in color is just as gorgeous as well. And you have colorist Dan Kemp working with you too. Such an awesome team up and collaboration. What does that creative process look like between you two? Do you just tell him to kind of do his own thing and trust him to do his thing as a colorist, or do you have a direction in terms of like mood and setting you wanted with the colors?
Well, I'll describe that by telling you how we first started doing these colors for these pages. So for those out there who don't know who Dan Kemp is, he has colored so many things in the comic world over the past like 30 years. One of the main things people know him from is his run of Spawn with Greg Capullo. He colored some of the more iconic covers for that comic series, and also stuff with Amazing Spider-Man, Wolverine Origins. He even worked on a recent Spawn universe comic called I Saw Santa. And so when we were going to get these pages, because we wanted 3 sample pages before the Kickstarter launched, I sent him these pages. We felt like these were the right ones to kind of, help people jump into what the aesthetic of the book is going to be like. Also introduced to some of the main characters, just kind of, killed 2 to 3 birds with 1 stone. Mm-hmm. And for this first page right here, we have up here, he was like, okay, any notes you can give me or whatever. And I sent him this long list of things like, okay, well, the mom is African-American, the daughter's, African-American, mixed. The husband's white. He's got, white beater shirt on, and, the jeans and stuff like that. And he messaged back saying, whoa, like, that's a lot. Like, and that's, it was more than that, what I just said, but there was a lot listed in the notes. And so I quickly learned that as amazing as Dan Kemp is, and he's awesome, you don't tell him what to do.
Yeah, you let Dan do the Dan thing, right?
Yeah, you let Dan do his thing. I mean, he's amazing, right? And so I messaged them back and forth, and I realized, how silly of me to try to suggest that he wouldn't know to color jeans blue, right? In fact, he kind of joked around me a little bit. He's like, I actually wanted to make the jeans, magenta, and I wanted to make the hat, yellow, just kind of like gentle teasing a little bit. But honestly, a lot of it is just handing it off to him and saying, hey, go nuts, do your thing. I know it's incredible. I mean, him and I have worked on different pieces together for a couple of years before starting full work on this book. But it's really cool to be able to hand it over to him, because while I can color to an extent, I'm not Dan Kemp, obviously. Yeah. And so being able to work with him has been an absolute dream, and he's absolutely killing it.
That is awesome. And right here are the 3 interiors, and this design is awesome. I really loved the blue and the gray with the hints of red around the ear, and just this glow from the eyes.
Oh yeah, it's just, it works so well. It worked so much better than I even imagined that it would, if I'm being quite honest. I mean, I had high expectations for what Dan Kemp was going to do. And every time I think like, I kind of have a good idea of how it's going to look. No, I don't. It comes back looking much more cooler than even the last time I worked with him, which I didn't know was possible.
So everyone watching, right there is the link to back this campaign. And if you're watching this at a later time, you can hit the description. We'll have a link down below for you to check out this campaign. You can get a digital copy of this for $3, which is an outstanding price. You said it was what, 30 pages?
34 for the first issue.
I mean, geez, that is, you're selling it dirt cheap at that point.
Well, I figure I gotta let people start somewhere,
And then we have a physical copy, cover A, coming hot off the press at 15, and cover B at 15 as well too. So I always love when you see a variant at the same price as the cover A.
Yeah, and a little something about this variant too is it was colored by another colorist named Alonzo Espinoza, who goes by Pixel Tool on Instagram. I always love to shout him out because I don't think he's been published yet, and it's an absolute crying shame that he hasn't. I don't know what people are thinking or not thinking by not signing him yet. So I love how that cover turned out. And we were talking about before the show how it's just a simple, look into what his character's about, and just simple story beats that you see there. But it's also just the colors just look so freaking great.
Yeah, and I just love the assembly, with the wrist and then the tools and everything. Some awesome prices here for both the covers at $30, and then you can get black and white cover set at $35. We have a complete set with a sketch variant at $70. So is just a blank cover, or are you going to be sketching something on that?
For this tier, they would just get a blank cover. So if they see me in person, they can get something custom done, or they can send it to me. Because you have the custom sketch cover tier underneath it, where you do get original artwork from me, and you just get that version. But I do full, pencils, inks, and colored markers on that sketch variant.
And you also get a copy of the PDF as well too. So if you don't want to crack that open and keep it minty fresh in the packaging, you don't even have to pull it out. We have the Ultimate Collector at $200, so you get a copy of each cover plus that blank sketch variant with custom work from DJ. And we have the God Mode Collector. So tell us a little bit about this one.
So of course it has everything that the Ultimate Collector has, but included with this one, there of course, there's 8 out of 9 left. It's a funny story. I started working on this book doing traditional pencils, the first 8 pages plus the cover. But as I was going, I love doing traditional,
Mhm.
but I love always going back to digital too. So I was like, let's do partial traditional, partial digital, so that we can, give people something of original artwork. But then in order to make sure that my work, goes faster and I can move things around if need be, I can do the rest of the pages with digital pencils, digital inks, and stuff like that. And so very, very limited. And you get a chance to either get the pencils, the original pencils for that cover that we just discussed with the face, coming apart, or one of the first couple of pages, which one of them is a full-on warehouse scene with a bunch of shelves and stuff, which took me forever. And that was just me pulling inspiration from my experience of working in a factory and just trying to think like, oh, what else would have been on those shelves? Okay, this, and let's add that. So basically, if whoever gets that page is getting a good 8 hours of my work for just $350.
And you'll be basically forklift certified.
I was actually.
So some awesome tiers. Guys, right there is the link. Be sure to hit it up. And once again, if you can't afford to back, just go ahead and share the link. Put the link out there. That helps more than you know. And I'm sure you're going to have a friend or family member that would love to pick up this book. DJ, for anyone who might be on the fence about backing, what would you like to say to them to help push them over that hump?
Well, what I'll say is that as far as maybe people who have backed Kickstarters before, I know that it can be frustrating when people get Kickstarters for books that are part of a series and it takes a long time for a follow-up to come along, right? That's one frustration that I've seen, at least for me, with Kickstarters that I've backed in the past and other people I've seen. But in my case, my wife will tell you I'm kind of a workaholic. And so by the time this thing is funded in the next 20 days, I will more than likely have 90 to 95% of the pencils and inks done for issue number 2. And so people will not have to wait very long in order for issue number 2's Kickstarter to probably go live and get all that done. So there's limited wait time for follow-up. So there's a plus. You get a really fun original story, which involves one of the greatest comic creators, in my opinion, over the past 30 years, one of the more influential comic creators. I mean, every time I talk to Dan Kemp, or almost every time, he likes to remind me that most comic companies out there, at least to some extent, will use his palettes for something, right? They'll use his palettes and his coloring techniques. You see colorists all over the place, great colorists, mind you, who use techniques that Dan Kemp, spearheaded and trailblazed. So you, in a way, get a bit of a piece of comic history, as well as just a really fun story that has been over a decade and a half in development. And really a culmination of years of 2 brothers brainstorming fun comic ideas. You're helping make a comic dream come to life, in a sense. Not to be overly dramatic, but that's the truth.
I also love that you're not only, writer, but artist in this as well. Is there any difficulty in that for you? Like, do you ever come up with like a really intricate scene in your head and go to plot it out with your pencil or on the tablet, and you're like, man, wait, this is way too insane. I don't know how to approach this.
Well, that doesn't quite happen with this book because it's not necessarily a super like actiony, like superhero explosions type of book. But as far as like writing out how, because I'll see it in my head first. I'm a very visual minded person. Like I'm the type of person that if a movie has great visuals and cinematography, but as a dog water story, I probably couldn't care less because I like the pretty pictures, right?
Yeah, you just mute it, right?
Exactly. Just absorb the imagery. So I'll have the images of what I want to see in my head. It's just putting that into words at first was pretty difficult. It's definitely gotten a lot easier as I've, ironed out the script and as I've, collaborated and, brainstormed with my brothers, other people that I really admire who are good writers. I mentioned Matt Slay before. That's another guy I've talked to back and forth about it. So it's definitely something that's been difficult in the past, but is getting easier. And of course, I have to knock on wood for that because, you never know when writer's block's going to strike. Because again, I don't consider myself a writer, but I know artist block exists. So it's bound to exist for the opposite too.
So DJ, I know this is your first time on the show, but we always love wrapping things up with a piece of advice and then what you're up to outside of creating. So for the writer or artist out there looking to just take their craft to the next level, maybe, they're like you and they're they love doing art in school and they want to take that passion into creating comics. What would be your biggest piece of advice to help them on that journey? You know, maybe some motivation or some tips or tricks that you've done. I know you mentioned doing quick sketches in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Sketching, practicing, and not just doodling for doodling's sake, but um, practicing technique, warming up before you start, fully drawing. Because that's something we don't really talk about. Like we do sports, we're like, oh yeah, do a warm up run or something. Art is the same way. You have to warm up your wrist muscles and everything. You have to warm up your brain as well. But as far as comics specifically, I would say the younger you start learning how to draw anatomy, the better off you will be. That is something that I wish that I had understood at a young age, because I always like to just draw what I see,
Yeah.
and just try to copy it verbatim. But when you actually learn how the human body works, how to do gesture drawing, for instance, how to quickly, make a believable piece of human anatomy or a body in a pose, right? The easier you will find it to, learn and develop as a comic artist. So getting, drawing anatomy books, studying those meticulously, and just, again, and drawing's a muscle. You can't just draw once in a week and then expect to come back and be like, oh yeah, I've improved. No, you haven't. You're either stagnant or you're trust me, there have been weeks where I've been traveling and I haven't been able to draw for a week and it feels like I forgot how to draw. And I have to do a whole like sketchbook session where it's like, okay, I have to remind myself, this is how this muscle looks, this is how this, type of pencil stroke should go, right? It's a muscle. And the more you train it, the more you study and, muscles in your wrist as well as in your brain, the better off you'll be. And again, the sooner you start actually taking that seriously, the better. Because again, for me, I didn't really take practicing drawing serious, because to me, drawing was always just a fun little thing. It's like, oh, I'd have to practice drawing. What are you talking about? Like, I would get sketchbooks, like actual like sketchbooks for Christmas and birthdays. And oftentimes I just end up drawing in my notebook in class and not really practicing anything. And that caused me to be stagnant for a long time. So again, if you're like in middle school, high school, and you want to try pursuing comic art, start studying like seriously now. Because again, at that point, if you get to the point where you're nearly 30 years old like I am, you'll be better than I am. So,
oh my God, nearly 30. I'm 36. So what do you mean by that?
I'm 29.
coming for my throat there. I love the advice. That's exactly why I'm not an artist, because I want the peaks and the valleys were just too harsh for me, man. Anytime I'm like, dude, yeah, this does not. I don't want to share this. Like,
well, and the thing too is that a lot of it depends on circumstance, right? There's some people who maybe don't have the time to set aside to pursue what they want to do with drawing, right? I find myself very fortunate to be in a situation where I can do this full time, where I've, made the connections that I have with, clients and stuff like that. And like, I consider myself very blessed to have the time that I do to work on myself. And so if you get to the point, we're around our age, right? I'm putting ourselves in the same category, right? It's a lot harder to set that time aside. Whereas again, if you're a middle schooler or a high schooler, you have classes and maybe you're doing sports, but you also have a lot of free time, right? You have a lot of time to, delve into interests, right? And sometimes it might be the difference between, picking up the controller and playing Fortnite and studying drawing, right? And just taking that time that you have and pursuing something you're passionate about.
So last but not least, what are you up to outside of creating? What video games are you playing? What TV shows are you watching? What books are you reading? We talked a lot about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's funny because I've been playing the crap out of Splinter's Fate on the Switch. That's right there. Yep, right there. Me and my daughter, we always play it and go through so many different runs trying to beat Shredder, and we finally did. And it felt so rewarding. I love those games where you just die, you have to restart the whole thing over. And if it was just such, I played through Dark Souls and Bloodborne. It's like as soon as we beat that, I was like, man, this was
You're
well
a brave
earned.
man.
Yeah.
No, for me, we were talking before the show. I'm very much a PS2 head. I have a red PS2 Slim that I play, and of course we have a Switch. But the main thing I play on that is just Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, just because open world is fun. But as far as video games, I'm actually been playing through the Lego Star Wars original trilogy.
Oh yeah.
Going for 100% completion. It's just because it's a big part of my childhood. It's fun way to unwind at the end of the day. In fact, I probably might play some of that after I get off here. Books, I'm actually reading a translation of The Neverending Story, which I had never read before. And I, of course, watched the movie growing up all the time, as most kids.
Isn't it crazy how many of those movies actually have a book or a comic behind it?
Right. And I found this copy at like a thrift mall like 2 years ago, and it's like really worn down, but it's like really cool to read. And what's funny about that is that halfway through the book is where the movie ends.
Oh, dude.
Yeah. And so I'm like, in the second half, and I was like, none of this happened in the movie.
Unspoken knowledge, dude.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know what's about to happen. This is weird, because the entire time you're reading it, like, you can see scenes from the movie and the aesthetic of the movie, but then it shifts in a different direction. It's like, oh crap, I'm in foreign territory. I was not expecting this. All right, let's try to recuperate a little bit. I'm also reading Spawn. I'm working my way again through the first compendium, which is like the first 55 issues, I think. And let's see, books, video games, just reading a lot, actually. I'm trying to be better about reading, because
it's hard to do, surprisingly.
Yeah. Like, I'll take like some time before I go to bed. And then let's see, video games. I'm slowly working my way through Lord of the Rings 2 Towers on the PS2.
Okay.
Which is one that I played a lot as a kid, but there was a segment during the siege of what's the castle in 2 Towers, Helm's Deep. Yeah, there was a section in that I never passed as a kid, and I'm slowly approaching that level, and I think I'm getting cold feet because I'm a little nervous that even my age now, I won't be able to beat it.
Man, what you eventually have to hit the PS4 era. Just for a brief moment, there's a game called Shadow of Mordor.
Yes.
And there's the Vengeance system in it, which is patented by Netflix. I think Netflix owns the patent to it. And it's so controversial because it's such an awesome system. Like, when the enemy, like, you kill an orc, it remembers you.
Yes.
And then it actively will seek you out to kill you. And like, if every time it beats you, it goes higher in rank and stuff. And it is patented by Netflix out of all companies. Like, it's like, what the hell, dude?
That's just not fun. Come on.
Such an awesome gameplay experience, dude. I loved it. The PS2 was such a... I remember playing... oh my God, the transition from PlayStation 1 to PS2, when you played Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3... on the PlayStation 1 compared to PS2, it was such a huge difference, and that's how you knew the capabilities of the system was just so far surpassed anything I could have ever imagined.
Yeah, I actually just finished recently playing through Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2.
Oh, so good, dude.
My whole thing with the PS2 is I'm just going through and collecting games that either I didn't finish as a kid, didn't get to play because I wasn't old enough, or we just never had. It's sort of a way of recapturing my childhood a little bit.
No, I get you. I got you, man. I did the same thing. Dude, it's some of those games get so expensive too. What, like Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3 is like $60-70 bucks. But man, it's crazy. The PS2 was used by the military, I think, for a hot second too. Or no, is that the PS3? One of the systems, there was a shortage on them because the military was using tons of them. I think it was the PS3. At the time, the capabilities of the hardware was like so insane that the military actually used it.
So it would probably be the PS3 item.
Yeah, probably, yeah. The PS2, though, marketing it with a DVD player, I deep dived that on a YouTube search, and it was like the only system that did that, and it's outsold everything.
Yeah, I think it's still like the best-selling console that has ever existed, which deservedly so. But yeah, just slowly making my way through all those different games. I have so many games, like video games, on eBay saved to buy later to add to the collection. It's honestly kind of ridiculous. And then I look at my bank account and I was like, can't do that. Another one that I started playing through was the Small Soldiers PS1 game.
Oh my God, dude. I love that movie so much. Chip Hazard, like, what a bastard.
Well, and the thing is, I like collecting, obviously, because I guess you can't see it behind the camera, but I was going through photos of me as a kid when I was like maybe 3 or 4, and I found one where I was playing with Major Chip Hazard and Archer, and they were the 12-inch figures, right? And I was like, man, it'd be cool to have those again. And I looked up like people selling them, they're like 300 or 400
Oh
bucks.
God, yeah, dude. Like if you're trying to get a transformer from back in the day, like you're looking at half a grand.
Yeah, and I'm like, where did those go? I have no memory of owning those. Why did we get rid of them? I was like livid at my parents for a good 5 minutes before I remembered, oh yeah, you guys moved around a ton. That happens. But yeah, no, that's another big part of my childhood that I'm slowly working through in video game form.
That is awesome. Well, everybody, it is time for us to wrap up. Right here is a link to check out the Kickstarter. Do yourself a favor. Check it out, back it. If you can't back, put it on Facebook, Twitter, wherever you can. Word of mouth is 100% free. DJ, thank you so much for swinging by. This was an awesome chat. I hope you all have a fantastic night. But most importantly, guys, keep it geekly.